This could be Donald Trump's best pick yet. The newly named White House press secretary Karoline Leavitt went absolutely nuclear on this ABC host, and this was to put the network in its place after its crass attempts at delegitimizing Donald Trump and downplaying the threat he faced from a segment of the fringe far left. Watch how it all went down and you'll know exactly why Trump picked her for the role.
You want to talk about violence against political opponents? Let's talk about the fact that Democrats have been labeling President Trump a threat to democracy for the better half of 10 years. Let's talk about how they have compared him to Hitler, one of the worst mass murderers in the history of the world, and that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden weaponized the court system and the justice system in this country against Donald Trump in an attempt to imprison him. He sat through a courthouse for 7 weeks this past year, and the Democrats were hoping he would go to jail for it. That is real political violence that has led to 2 heinous assassination attempts on President Trump's life that, by the grace of God, he was able to escape, and he is here with us today. So yes, President Trump knows a little bit about political violence because he's experienced it himself. And talking about the tragic realities of war that Liz Cheney and her father Dick Cheney have got this country into is not political violence. It's talking about the reality of the foreign conflicts that the Washington, D.C. establishment have sold out young Americans to for decades.
She just keeps going like a machine gun, and I can't imagine what the upgrade is going to look like after someone like Karine Jean-Pierre. But the truth is, that's what happens when you speak in plain facts. The line from political rhetoric to political violence is tough to draw, but I think we've seen it work dangerously in reverse in the last year. It's that rhetoric that demonizes a candidate to the extent of basically making him out as Satan incarnate, as the left-wing media has done to Trump, eventually leading to some deranged individual using that as cover and wanting the glory to take them out. That's exactly what Donald Trump's second would-be assassin Ryan Ruth was motivated by, and he had set up a GoPro camera at just the right angle before he took aim at Trump to capture the moment of his personal glory. And I personally think that's a blind spot that modern politics has that someone like Karoline Leavitt can hammer down like no one else.
After those attempted assassination attempts on the former president's life, his opponents reached out to him and said they do not accept political violence. That has been a key difference there. I do want to play you.
No, please. His opponents are saying to this very day the same rhetoric that led to those 2 assassination attempts. The second attempted assassin on President Trump's life echoed the sentiment that President Trump is a threat to democracy. And if you're a deranged lunatic and you're mentally ill, you will believe that lie. And yes, you will take political violence like we have seen in 2 instances against President Trump. Last week, Tim Walz and Kamala Harris said that everyone who showed up to President Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden was a Nazi. That's despicable, dangerous, divisive rhetoric that is spewed by the Democrat Party every single day. And I am so sick and tired of the media pointing the finger at Donald Trump and saying that he is sowing division in this country. He is not. The media is for pushing hoaxes like the one that you all pushed today, and the Democrat Party is for pushing lies about him. But the good news is Americans don't buy it. And that's why today in 2024, President Trump is more popular than he has been since 2016, because people don't trust the media and they're not buying the Harris campaign's closing argument that he's some great threat to our democracy, because they lived under him for 4 years as president, and our democracy and our country was stronger than it is today.
But you know what's crazy this time? Karoline mentioned the rally at Madison Square Garden, where MSNBC literally ran an entire segment comparing it to a rally supporting the German dictator in 1939. And if you send out that message en masse to the audience, just how long do you think it will be before someone gets up to nip that dictator in the bud? After all, it gives you the moral license to do it in your mind. By the way, here's a snapshot of the MSNBC segment because I think it's the perfect example to point out that Karoline was trying to drive home.
Donald Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden comes days after his own former chief of staff went on record to describe his former boss as a fascist. But that jamboree happening right now, you see it there on your screen, in that place is particularly chilling because in 1939, more than 20,000 supporters of a different fascist leader packed the garden for a so-called pro-America rally, a rally where speakers voiced anti-Semitic rhetoric from a stage draped with Nazi banners. Against that backdrop of history, Donald Trump, the man who has threatened to use the military against opponents he calls enemies from within, who has threatened to use the troops to quell what he says are lawless cities, and to use those troops to carry out mass deportations of immigrants is once again turning Madison Square Garden into a staging ground for extremism.
I'm surprised this is even allowed to air, but ultimately the MSM hurts no one but themselves with cheap stunts like this. But still, you can't simply overlook or dismiss these rabid attacks against a candidate that works to turn up the knob of political heat to the point that it eventually boils over into violence. But as with many things, there's something deeply hypocritical about this rhetoric coming from the left. It's that they don't seem to believe it themselves. Otherwise, you'd see organized protests that attempt to stop Trump from taking power. That's what you'd do if a literal dictator like the one in Germany was consolidating power in the US. Ironically, Donald Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden had less than 100 protesters show up in a crowd of around 40,000 people, both inside the MSG and waiting outside, and at some point, you just have to call out this blatant duplicity for what it is. It is shielding cowardice and hypocrisy by spinning political drivel from a safe distance. But you know the media is not going to get away with that easily if someone like Caroline has something to say about it, and we got a peek into what it would look like when she clashed with CNN's Casey Hunt a few months ago, when Caroline called out debate moderators for their clear bias and vile past statements against Trump.
So it takes someone 5 minutes to Google Jake Tapper, Donald Trump, to see that Jake Tapper has consistently,
we're going to stop this interview if you're going to keep attacking my colleague. Ma'am, I'm going to stop this interview if you continue to attack my colleagues. I would like to talk about Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who you work for.
Yes.
If you are here to speak on his behalf, I am willing to have this conversation.
I am stating facts that your colleagues have stated in the past.
Okay,
now,
I'm sorry, guys. We're going to come back out to the panel. Caroline, thank you very much for your time. You are welcome to come back at any point. She is welcome to come back and speak about Donald Trump, and Donald Trump will have equal time to Joe Biden when they both join us now at later this week in Atlanta for this debate.
I think there's something particularly disarming about someone like Caroline, which is visible from this example. She's very different to White House press secretaries we've seen in the past on both sides, including Karine Jean-Pierre, Sean Spicer, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders. It's that she's just 27, a Gen Z in touch with both the sentiment on social media, as well as inside the halls of power close to Donald Trump, and it's by being the bridge between the generations combined with a firm yet fiery style of speech that makes her uniquely equipped to take the mainstream media by the horns and run it into the ground. That's exactly what's needed, at least, because this Trump term is going to be even more interesting for his relations with the media than last time. That's because it's not desperate, especially after having realized this election that they are now less powerful than online media. They're a hollow husk of their former self and shoved to the ground as the walls close in, and that means they'll lash out, which is a job for a young, dynamic Republican millennial, rather than a straight-faced and bureaucratic spokesperson. But I'd like to know what you think about Caroline and her appointment, and share this video across your social media to see if she's generating the same buzz. There's no doubt, certainly, that she fits like a puzzle piece in the exciting cabinet that Donald Trump is already putting into place, even before inauguration.